Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. If you're new to the channel, please be sure to subscribe now for future content. Please make sure you leave a like on this video, as it will recommend this video to so many more people for them to enjoy. If you want your story featured on an upcoming video, email me at thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. I will leave a link to my email in the description box below as well. Sit back, relax, stay sinful. This story happened a few years ago. I was in my early 20s and was studying in Paris, France. I was going home from university. I usually took a short bus ride and walked the rest of the way. That day, I felt slightly uncomfortable. I could sense some guy looking intensely at me. I was used to unpleasant, unsolicited gazes, but this time, his gaze felt beastly. It's hard to explain why, but I felt like a prey being stalked. I decided to get off the bus a few stops early. I wanted to avoid him and didn't want him to see where I usually get off. Like I learned from the movies, I waited until someone else pressed the stop button and waited until the last moment to stand up and leave. I didn't notice him getting off the bus. Just as I was feeling the relief of having escaped an uncomfortable situation, I looked over my shoulder. There he was, a few meters behind. I had the distressing feeling his eye had just looked away the moment I turned. I walked into a shop, took my phone and pretended to be taking a call. When I couldn't see him anymore, I exited and made my way home as fast as I could. I kept looking back in the busy street. I zigzagged, crossed the street at every crossing. Finally, I believed that him getting off at the same stop as me was just a coincidence. When I reached my building, I looked back one last time, and there he was. His alarming gaze on me, smirking. I ran up to my apartment, climbing the stairs 4 at a time. I reached the top floor, squeezed through my door, locked it, and froze. My intercom was ringing. Don't ask me why I picked it up. I regretted it the moment I did. I could hear the opposite flat intercom ringing as well. He had pressed all the buttons one by one, hoping someone would open. But now, he knew my name. Gabrielle. Oh shit. I feel like a deer in the headlights, frozen. "Open the door, please," said a pleading voice. "I just want to talk to you." Somehow I couldn't move or speak. "Come to the window," he added. "Look at me. You'll see I'm not a bad guy." Something clicked. He wanted to locate my apartment in the building. I was not going to make that mistake. I hung up in shock. I waited by the door without moving for what seemed like hours. When I finally managed to calm myself, I called my long-distance boyfriend. "Call the police," he said immediately. Why didn't I call the police? I don't know. Today it would be the first thing I would do. The fear of making a big deal out of something not important, perhaps. What an idiot I was. I called my best friend instead. I didn't want to feel alone. I told her all about it, and after a while I felt better, safe. We started laughing. Suddenly the intercom rang again. 2 hours had passed since I came home. I answered. "Gabriel," said the voice. "Open, please." I still remember the chills I felt. He was still there. He was there all this time. I was silent, petrified. He was silent, but I could sense his trepidation. "Gabriel, let me in." "I'm so thirsty," he said. "Just give me a glass of water." This broke the tension, and I hung up. Curled up in a corner, literally in recovery position, terrified. I waited. I was scared to make a sound. I knew he could hear me from the hall, but I was scared even to breathe. The intercom rang again and again. I didn't answer this time. I crouched to the sofa and fell asleep from exhaustion. I heard the intercom ring one more time in the middle of the night. I woke up in the morning afraid to leave my apartment. I called my dad, who came to pick me up. There was no one in the hall, but there was a note in my mailbox. "Gabrielle, I'm a nice guy. You should have opened for me." We immediately went to the nearest police station. The police listened and, of course, told me that I should not hesitate to call them. My dad called a locksmith to install digicode on the building the same day and wrote a message to each of my neighbors asking to not open the door to anyone they didn't expect. He sat in the cafe in front of my building with 2 friends every evening for more than a week. I never saw the stalker again. After this episode, I used a different route to and from university every day. I kept my phone tightly in my hand and looked back every few meters. Today, I'm still very observing of my surroundings. I never answer the door to anyone I'm not expecting. So people, if you ever find yourself alone in any kind of uncomfortable situation, call the police. Don't be an idiot like me. Be safe, everyone. This was back in 2013 when I lived in New York City as a 23-year-old. I was living with my best friend from college on the west side near Times Square. I was going through some tough times back then, as I was unemployed at the time. I had had a lot of time, so I would go on walks by myself to clear my head time to time. One night, I was feeling especially depressed, so I decided to walk to K-Town to grab a drink by myself. I'm Korean, by the way. I walked into a Korean bar and got some weird looks from the waiter as I asked for a table by myself. After ordering a couple of soju bottles, I was feeling pretty drunk, so I decided to walk back home. However, as I was exiting the bar, this Korean guy followed me. He looked very normal, just like a nice Korean guy. He told me that he saw me drinking at the bar by myself and that he would love to walk me home to make sure I get home safe. I politely declined. After all, my apartment was very close, but he insisted and he looked so harmless that I decided to take him up on his offer. We walked 10 minutes, and it was quite pleasant. We were both a little drunk, but I remember talking about all sorts of things, nothing personal. When we finally arrived at my apartment, I thanked him and wished him farewell. Now, my apartment was a 5-story walk-up, and there was a main door where we needed a key to open to get into the building. No doorman. I didn't think much of it and inserted the key to open the door and went inside. The door takes a while to close shut, and it was my mistake for not checking before I went up the stairs. While I was approaching the 2nd floor, I heard someone grab the door from closing, and I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. I literally got goosebumps all over my body, and I felt like I was in danger. As I started to pick up the pace, I heard the footsteps going faster up the stairs. I lived on the 5th floor and started to run up, clutching my keys in my hand. The guy started to run up the stairs as well, and I can literally hear him getting closer and closer to me. This all happened in a couple of seconds, but it felt so long. I finally got to my floor, and as I tried to open the door, I looked back, literally saw the guy's head on the staircase. I rushed open the door, and I managed to close the door right in his face. My heart was beating so fast, and I didn't know what to do at that point. It was already 3 a.m. and my roommate was dead asleep. Luckily, he didn't knock or anything, so I decided to just go to my room and hope that he'd gone home. Around 7 a.m., my roommate woke me up. She said that there was a man standing in the front of our apartment door. My heart sank and I explained the whole situation to her. She and I went to the door and screamed that we were going to call the police if he doesn't leave. I looked out the peephole, and he told me that he will only go home if I gave him my number. We then called the police and saw him being escorted out. My roommate had to go to work, so she left the apartment, called me a few minutes later. She told me that she saw the guy speaking to the police downstairs. Apparently he tried to lie to the officers that I'm his girlfriend and that we got into a fight. My roommate went up to them and explained to the officers that I do not have a boyfriend and that she doesn't know him at all. The police let him off with a warning. About 2 hours later, I heard a buzz from the main door downstairs. Maybe it's the police. Surely it can't be him again. I answered the intercom and I was shook. It was him again. "Just give me your number and I'll go away," he said. I warned him that I was going to call the police again if he didn't leave immediately. A couple of minutes later, I heard ferocious knocks on my door. He must have gotten in when someone was entering the building. I was so scared at that point, so I immediately called 911. Unfortunately, the guy ran away before the police arrived. The worst part about this experience was that my roommate and I were so scared to leave and come back home. I would have anxiety every time I came home from work, worried that I might see him in the front of our apartment door. For about a week, the police escorted us when we felt scared. I never saw him again, but it was one of the scariest moments of my life. So creepy stalker dude, let's not meet. Before I start, I have to explain something. I lived 2 years ago in a house that had a terrace and a small parking lot 1 meter below the terrace. My room was upstairs and there was a door to the stairs that could be locked. I live in the south of France in the Pont Royal area. Everything was going well. I lived with my former father-in-law and mother. I was playing Minecraft in my room. For no reason, I looked to the left towards my window, and I see a man standing there with a balaclava staring inside my window. I see an object in his hand, but I don't pay attention. I get stressed and I go to warn my mother and stepfather, completely panicked. They lock all the doors and it takes me a while to sleep and forget about it. Weeks go by, and 2 months after this stressful moment, the same thing happens again. This time I was playing Among Us, but I had changed my habits. I was always looking at the window to see if the man was there, and I was always closing the doors. So I see this guy again. Although I'm stressed, this time I'm really scared because I'm home alone. I leave for 10 seconds, and suddenly I don't see him anymore. I tell myself he's gone, but no, I hear a large noise at the front door, so I deduce that it has been forced. I totally stress. I take my phone, my keys, and my laptop in a bag, and I think it's about the situation, but I open the window and I go down the terrace. I went down to the parking lot, and I hear at this moment another noise coming from the inside of my house. Then a third one, and I see the same guy, and I distinguish the same object in his hands, which was a knife. I then start to run until I reach the house of a friend. I'm totally exhausted by sprinting, and fortunately he opens. I tell him with difficulty what exactly just happened. In the meantime, I call my mother and the security of the domain. Shortly after, I see the same car make several turns in the domain and pass 4 times in front of my friend's house. And at the second passage of this one, I recognize the man who was there a few moments earlier. And I see not only one person, but 4. 2 years after having lived that, I obviously moved in a bigger city, but moreover in an apartment in a quiet district, and my boyfriend now often stays with me. I've never shared this story, except strangely enough to my teacher at the time. I was in the 1st grade at Northside Elementary in DeSoto, Texas. We lived about 3 long blocks down, as my mother liked to call. I personally feel it was a lot more. My sister and I were brought to school on a regular basis and walked home. My parents decided to divorce right at this time. My dad moved out and we started seeing him every other weekend. My mom began dating someone else, and I remember she no longer became interested in taking us to school as much. She became very preoccupied with her new relationship, and I remember that she often had me walking to school as well as coming home. Thinking back now, I'm not sure why I was late. There might have been a doctor appointment or something like that. I remember that it wasn't very late at all, maybe just an hour or so after school had started. My mom pulled up in the car and I got out. I remember hoping that she would wait there to watch me go up the flights of stairs and inside, but she drove off immediately, to my dismay. And this is when I saw him. A man, pretty normal looking, stepped out of a car looking directly at me. My mom had pulled off and this man was the only person around. He crossed the street quickly, at an angle coming directly towards me. I remember turning and running up the steps. There were 3 flights of stairs with landings in between. When you're a little girl, these stairs seem much larger. I remember looking over my shoulder, and he was literally running up the stairs after me, and I had that horrible gut reaction and ran as fast as I could. I remember the double doors in front of me, and I was panicked, thinking I would not make it. At that young age, I felt the energy coming from this otherwise normal-looking person who looked like a dad. I remember the huge intrinsic feeling of doom and urgency to go through those doors, and I did. I immediately turned around and saw him standing on one part of the second set of stairs, and he just stood there looking at me, and he just stood there looking at me as I looked at him from inside the building. The man looked very frustrated and turned, walking away back to his car. I remember telling my teacher about the whole situation. Maybe a week or so later, a police detective showed up to interview me about what had happened. This makes me think it may be connected to something that happened in that area at the time. I don't think I've ever been that afraid in my life, and it was a powerful internal fear. It was like my body told me immediately to run to survive. Longtime lurker of this subreddit, and this is my first time posting anything. I've been waiting to share this story ever since I first started reading everyone's stories, so here it goes. This took place when I, 26-year-old female, was about 16 years old. My aunt was in town visiting and we were coming back from the grocery store. We were driving back to my mom's house. She lived way out in the countryside. It's a 10-minute drive from anywhere to get to her house. We pull up to her driveway and a red car pulls in behind us. My aunt and I stay in the car and the man approaches the driver's side door. I can't rightly tell you why he looked like a creep, but he looked like a creep. The man had very pasty skin, eyes that were staring too hard, just overall weird. He claims he is lost and looking for his way to a fitness center in the town next over. The exact fitness center that is about a minute away from where the grocery store is, i.e. in the opposite direction of where we just came from. Super odd, but I give him directions. He thanks me but continues to stare through me. He asks if we know each other, and I reply no. He gives me his name and I again repeat no, I do not know you. Couple of seconds of awkward staring and he asks what my name is. Well, being an idiot and feeling anxious, I told him my name. That was a mistake. He confirms we don't know each other and heads back to his car and we watch him leave. My aunt and I agree he was very strange, but shake it off and take the groceries inside. From where we parked, you have to take a little winding path up between the house to the back door. My aunt goes outside to grab the rest of the groceries, and I settle in on the couch in the living room and look outside. Red car in the driveway. My aunt comes upstairs and said the guy was almost to our door, claimed he forgot his directions. My aunt curtly told him, right, left, right, told him to leave. The directions were truly that simple when following the main roads. I'm freaked, she's freaked, but we never see him again. A month passes and I'm chilling at my dad's and posting something like, I'm bored at my dad's house, who wants to chill on Facebook. Guys, always set your page to private. Several minutes later, I get a message from the same guy asking if I wanted him to come over. I'm home alone and understandably terrified. I immediately block him and tell my dad, who goes to one of his cop friends to see if they know anything about the man. Well, this man was kicked out of a local university for stalking and had 2 other counts of stalking on top of that and a restraining order. Another month goes by and I'm in study hall with a friend. He's telling me about this guy who was stalking his older sister. I don't remember the specific details, but it was definitely the story of someone being stalked. The craziest part was this stalker almost drove this girl's brother off the road in an attempt to get him to pull over. Once pulled over, stalker jumped out and was making his way to my friend's vehicle when my friend noped right out of there. I'm sure you guessed it, but the stalker and the creep I ran into were one and the same person. So creepy, pasty stalker man, let's not meet again. Update. Following me posting this, I decided to reach out to my friend whose sister was stalked. He asked if I had heard about last summer. Apparently he was arrested for attempting to kidnap 3 different women inside of 1 hour. Failing on all attempts and almost running over the last woman's father, who was with her at the time, I confirmed it via news article. I'm still pretty floored by it all. This might be a little long, but it still gives me nightmares. I'm a 21-year-old female. I drive from Miami to Daytona Beach near Orlando almost every week. I make sure to fill up before I start off, but this one one unfortunate day I did not. I left Daytona around 12 a.m. driving back to Miami. I drive a black Mustang 40th anniversary. I was literally flooring it back home through I-95. The entire route was empty other than a few trucks and small cars here and there. I was jamming to some good music, not paying attention to what was going on with my own fuel tank. Around 2:30 and 2:45 a.m., the low fuel warning came up. I saw it and started looking for the nearest exit, which happened to be Boynton Beach. I've never been there and had no idea about how the area is. I took the exit and saw that there was a Circle K right off the exit. I was a little relieved because now I at least wouldn't be running out of fuel in the middle of nowhere. Now with barely any fuel left in my tank, I pull up to the gas station. It's totally empty. I cannot even see a single car inside or outside on the road. There were no people other than a tall man in a red-colored jacket walking around near the side of the gas station store where all the parking lot was, but he was not very close to the pump I was at. I was a little scared, but I usually try and shake my fear off by telling myself that it's nothing. This man at this point is looking at the ground but kind of walking in the general direction of my car. I'm still inside the car contemplating whether I should get out or stay in. Usually I would have just gotten out and fueled, not being scared. But that day something in my gut told me to lock the door and wait inside. At this point, this guy is just a few feet away from my car, still not looking at me. I'm trying to tell myself, it's okay. He doesn't even care that I'm here, and I should just get out. But then my worst fear comes to life. The man looks straight up at me and dashes towards the driver's side door and tries to open it. At this point, it's around 3 a.m. with no other people in the general vicinity. I literally froze for a second and thought, I'm going to die. This is how I die. He pulled on the door handle several times trying to get it to open, but then I somehow got my senses back, turned the car on and floored it. He didn't let go of the door handle until I started the car and hit the gas. I'm so thankful that despite the low fuel, my car still started up and drove away. I had nothing on me to defend myself, nothing at all other than a plastic fork I got from Panda Express earlier. I still can't get over the whole experience. It still scares the living shit out of me. Creepy man from the gas station, let's never meet again. This happened a couple of years ago when I was around 13 or 14 years old. I would go to Nerf wars with my friends during the weekends with a semi-auto rifle and one of those revolver-looking pistols as a sidearm. On one of those occasions, I brought my girlfriend to the Nerf war with me. For some context, my girlfriend's my neighbor. She lives in the same area as I do, and we've known each other for some time, around preschool, I think. As you do for a Nerf war, you pack up spare darts, spare mags, etc. So the Nerf war ended. We had a great time as usual, and we go our separate ways. As me and my girlfriend's walking back home, my paranoia kicks in, and I have a feeling that someone was following us. I glanced back slightly, and there was a guy in all black. At first, I thought of it as one of my friends awkwardly following us, but remembered that none of them were wearing full plain black. I turn back to my girlfriend and tell her we're being followed. She glances back slightly and sees the same man. She starts panicking, so I tell her just to calm down. It's probably just some guy going to the subway as well. So we get on the train, hoping that the man would stop following us. As I'm making sure my rifle isn't bothering anyone, I feel my girlfriend's grip on my hand tighten. Then she whispers, telling me that the man was on the train as well and now staring at us. At this point, I had enough of this guy's shit. I was tired, and the last thing I needed was some dude stalking me and my girlfriend. Luckily, our stop was 2 stations or so away, so when we get there, we bounced out of the cart immediately. I looked back, and the man was indeed behind us. We get up to the streets, hoping that there would be at least someone or some sort of camera that would be able to see me and my girlfriend, but the streets were basically empty, with only a couple of people going back home. My girlfriend was trembling beside me, scared to all hell. I told her my plan, and with some hesitancy, she agreed to it. I stopped moving to take a drink of my water, my girlfriend shifting her hand towards my leg so it wouldn't be as obvious. It was dark at this time. I felt her hand ripped away from my leg, and I heard her terrified screams. I decided to grab the closest weapon I had on me, the stock of my Nerf rifle. The stock's attached to Nerf guns with 2 clips latching onto them, so it wouldn't take long to put it on or take it off. My stock was large. It wasn't metal, but it was a solid piece of plastic that could do some damage to someone's face. I whacked the guy around the face, grabbed my girlfriend's hand, and got the hell out of there. We waved down the closest taxi, got on inside, happy that we weren't being stalked by some guy. I don't talk about this incident much, but just wanted to share it and get it off my chest. Because of this incident, I stopped playing Nerf for a while. My rifle's been stored in my Nerf armory for a couple of years untouched. Every time I think of Nerf, this incident comes to mind. I went to the police station a few days ago to put down a complaint about some person who scammed me when I was trying to get a graphics card. A guy who seemed nice overheard the conversation and proposed me to come over, as he spares electronic equipment that he doesn't use anymore. The man said that he could help, saying that if it could help someone else, he'd be glad to give it out now. Now, I didn't really put any hope into it, as it was unlikely that I would finish something interesting, but I took up the offer. He didn't have that fishy person aura, so I accepted coming over in a few days. I wouldn't show up alone though, just in case. A few days after, I go to this man's house with my brother. First, the guy's not wearing a mask and tries to handshake me. There is an old person in the background of the home watching us with beer in hand. I can see from here that the yard is a complete mess with things everywhere. He guides us inside. We take a look around, and then he starts pulling stuff out of a bag, and it's like a 15 to 20-year-old graphics card that are completely worthless. I told him it wasn't going to work. It's too old. He tells us to follow him to the garage, which is even more of a mess than the yard. Things laying everywhere, and there's a very dirty pool, not even covered although we're still in winter. He shows us one of those first-generation graphics card, old and bulky. I tell him it's not going to work either, and he takes us to a shed behind the house with even more things. It's a shady place in a weird alley, and I freaked out a little because the older person who hadn't said a single word was following us. He rumbles through his shed, telling me that the card he intended to give me was somewhere, but he couldn't find it. Too bad. I prepare to go away, but then he asks me if we could look at a PC that doesn't boot. I accept and go inside the room, which is apparently the kids' room, and it's messy as every other room. I approach the computer and it's missing keys, and it's dirty everywhere. I sit down with my brother, start fiddling with the computer. The grandpa appears out of nowhere and sits behind my brother, which kind of freaks me out by the way he looks at us. I'm trying to fix the PC when the mother comes in and tells me she doesn't know much about computers, but that she goes on the dark web. She asks me if I can check every device in the house to make sure they haven't been pirated and that she's being spied on. At that point, I look at my brother, confused, and we kind of mentally communicate. Yeah, we need to get out of here. It's starting to get weird. I tell the guy that I can't seem to fix it and that it's above what I know, and he's okay with it. The old man lights up a cigarette in the room and we get out of here. The guy keeps us and talks for like 5 more minutes. They seem like they wanted us to stay. We tell them we have a bus to catch and kind of walk quickly out of there. The mother stops us and asks if we're going to come back to inspect their devices, and I just say that we'll contact them again. After that, I panicked and blocked the number when I got out of there. This took place during winter break my freshman year of college, well over a decade ago. My friend and I decided to head to the rifle range we had frequented previously during high school. It had been about 10 months since we were last there, in the Northeast USA. The rifle range was outdoors, unmanned, and on the state game lands. You never knew who may be there. I've encountered strange, possibly sinister kids there in the past. Fair amount of normal people as well. We parked the truck and I immediately noticed skinned rabbits. Dozens of them. They were obscured at first because the grass, now dead in the winter, had grown so tall, falling over and cradling these neatly arranged rows of skinned small animals, possibly rabbits or raccoons. It disturbed me how hard to tell what something is once its skin has been removed. It disturbed me that someone would lay the new carcasses right next to the old ones. Each neat pile was in a different state of decay. Despite our better judgment, my friend and I decided to enter the rifle range. I grabbed my 2 rifles, like plastic guitar cases. This will come into play later. The rifle range is a large bunker cut into a taller hill. It extends 1,000 feet and the walls on the left are 40 to 80 feet tall. There's a question mark shaped path leading around the bunker to the gallery, where you stand or sit to shoot, not sure the proper terminology. Approaching the trail, I notice a dead deer off to the left of the trail, then another off to the right, then another further down in the center of the trail, all decomposing. A large hole in its abdomen filled with maggots. There's another that's all maggots aside from the bones. Never seen anything like that before. My friend and I carry on, me in front. Once we round the corner in the gallery area, there are 2 or 3 more dead deer. Like a deflated deer balloon on the gravel, almost nothing left of them, 2-dimensional. This is when it really sets in how dilapidated the place has become. Everything is overgrown. Even looking down range, the grass had nearly covered the whole area 2 to 3 feet tall, except for a trail in the center leading towards the back of the bunker. Along this path there is 1 dead deer every 50 feet or so off the side of the trail. The number of deer carcasses I've seen now is outrageous. Over 20. It felt beyond belief. About 500 downrange there's a pack of dogs, maybe 8 to 10, an almost ridiculous looking number, all circled around a deer eating it. I'm standing right at the front of this path. I turn back and my friend is pale-faced at this horrifying sight. Like a complete dumbass, I say, "What the hell?" Immediately, 1 dog's ears perk up. It picks up its head and looks right at me, like it's in slow motion. It lets out a quick bark. The whole circle of them in a carousel lift their head one by one, locking their eyes on me. I glance back at my friend. He's already started running, 20 feet ahead of me. I look back downrange and see the dogs are already charging me. They already look twice as close. I start running as hard as I possibly can with those 2 guitar cases holding 2 rifles. I can't full sprint holding these things. I'm debating dropping them to run faster. I found the corner around the bunker entrance. Look back and see they're already in the gallery, skidding on the gravel to square the corner. 8 of the 10 of the most mangy-looking hellhounds coming for me. I'm hoofing it as hard as I can. It's now a roughly straight shot to my friend's pickup truck. I glance quickly behind me and there's only singular feet behind me. I'm not going to outrun them. I think about dropping the cases. I glance again over my right shoulder and see something forever burned into my memory. A dog in mid-air leaping at me, fangs out, hopelessly close to me now. I'm still on full sprint, looking forward again, waiting to feel this thing's jaws sinking into a calf or a thigh. Total temporal distortion. Time slowed down. I thought of how I just saw a show on the History Channel. An old man, a World War II vet, had survived a mountain lion attack. He said that if a rabid dog attacks you, raise your forearm in front of their throat. They'll latch onto it and won't let go. I'm waiting for this to happen, getting knocked down. I envision one gets into my leg, rolling onto my back, throwing my arm up to catch one going for my throat. Then things torn to pieces by the other 7. I realize this could be how it ends. Astonished, being mauled to death. It felt like someone pushed me forward, giving me a burst of speed forward, then another, almost causing me to fall forward. Then I realized the dogs were smacking off the big guitar cases hanging at my sides, each time pushing me forward. This happened 5 to 6 times, and just then I was crossing in front of a truck. I throw the gun cases on the hood, open the door and hop inside. My friend is already in the driver's seat. The dogs are gone. I'm feeling like I just escaped a death from a horror movie. Expecting to hear some words of relief for my fate, my friend instead calls me an idiot for leaving the guns on the hood. I guess he wants to shoot at them. I tell him to screw himself. I'm not getting out of this truck. I almost died right in front of him. Eventually he gets out, gets a rifle from the case of the hood, loads it and climbs up the side of the bunker. He says they're gone. I quickly scamper up, confirm, then insist we leave. On the way home, I see a local cop at the gas station. It's inside his municipality. I'm telling him about the range and what just happened as briefly as possible, how it's a danger. He seems to get more aggravated the longer I talk, so I stop. There's an awkward silence and he coldly says, "Yeah, it's really bad out there." From his tone and body language, I can tell this exchange is over. He goes back to his conversation with the cashier. I just turn around and leave without saying anything else. I still wonder what the hell I walked into. What if I had dropped those gun cases? Why was someone dumping their illegally skinned carcasses at a rifle range on state game land? And what killed all of those deer? The place was fairly well maintained for 2 to 3 years, and we'd been there inside the last year. Were those dogs? Wolves? Coyotes? Why was the cop so dismissive? Probably the easiest one to answer. The range is gone now. There's a natural gas oil well there. I don't really know where to post this. I've been sitting on this for a long time, so I figured I'd try it here. Thank you for reading if you made it. So for some context, my friends 16 and 16 years old, and I 16 from about 1 a.m. to 4:30 a.m. went on a night walk. The streets nearby are usually empty highways or weird roads. It's a small suburb inland. Around 3:30 a.m., we started to walk over to a nearby playground. On the way there, one of our friends who's interested in cars walks up to one to shine the torch on it, accidentally wakes someone up in there, and immediately apologizes. A few minutes go by, and we just start listening to music and talking for a good 45 minutes. Then it started to get cold, so we decided to head back. Our friend felt really bad for waking that guy up, and we all kind of had a gut feeling something would happen. As we walked past, nothing happened. No sounds, no lights, nothing. Then, just as we leave the park, we see who we assume is him, walking towards us. He seemed like he was under the influence of something, not sure what. We waved and said hi, told him to have a good night and all that, and he told us to stay on a certain side of the road for our safety. So we just did anyway. What's the harm, right? Something felt off though, so we had to look behind us, and the man kept walking for a few seconds, then stopped. He started to come back the way he came, slowly, and just sort of followed us in the dark. This was fucking terrifying. The only thing we really had on us, if we wanted to use them, were 3 glow-in-the-dark lightsabers that we brought along for a battle. We ended up taking a few shortcuts through the area, circled our way back home and inside. Even then, it still took us a while to process what had just happened. I'm a young woman and I run a business from home selling things online. If my extra products don't sell, I have a lot of yard sales, like mega yard sales, to try and salvage some cash, make room in my inventory. I have extended family who come from an hour away to also sell things with me, and it's just easier with help. I live in a good suburb, just a lot of old people. I like that I live within eyesight of an elementary school and a church, just good energy to have around. I had a big garage full of stuff, so I started carrying it to my yard super early, At 1 a.m. laying out blankets and bringing stuff outside in boxes. I'm listening to music on my headphones while I'm doing this. I get half of it out so the back half of my yard is slowly pushing forward with boxes. There's very few cars out as it is very late at night, but I start to notice this white car multiple times. It happens about 3 times that I see them go up on the road, turn around at a U-turn, or go around the church parking lot, or into the elementary school lot, turn around, drive by my house on their way out. I pull out the back bed on our truck and sit, just watch them while they do it. I called my family, and they agreed to come at 5 a.m. instead of later, and I agreed to stay inside for them. They always slowed down slightly in front of my house. They did this for hours, each time showing up about 5 to 10 minutes apart. I took videos while I was inside of the car turning around and slowly going down in front of my house at 3 and 5 a.m. over and over again. I really wonder how long they were there before I noticed. I think they were waiting for me to get close to the front of my lawn to try and grab me. The kicker is the car stopped showing only when they saw my family was outside. I sometimes see the same car driving around a college campus close by the dorms late at night. About 2 years ago, my best friend's family brought me camping with them in the Adirondacks in upstate New York. Specifically Old Forge, which is a small, delicate town that almost gives off the feeling of something you'd see in the 80s movies. When we got to the campground, my friend and I walked throughout the campsite, saw many abandoned cabins, especially as we got deeper into the woods. These cabins were run down and engulfed into forest almost. When it got dark, we went back to our campsite, finally feeling uneasy about the campgrounds itself. Then we got ready for bed in his family's camper, but ended up sleeping in the car. We had fun for a while prank calling places and calling our friends. After all the fun, we were tired from our day, decided to try and get some rest. I was very uncomfortable and was unable to fall asleep, so I decided to just sit on my phone for a while. As the night went on, I kept getting more of an uneasy feeling. I saw the camper's light go on, and I thought it may have been a small animal or maybe the wind. It turns out it was a giant bear. Me, being used to the city, was startled, waking my best friend, which put him into a panic, and we slowly noticed that it was more than one bear. There were 3 rummaging through our garbage. Finally, a park ranger came over and scared them off, like it was nothing. Unable to fall asleep for the rest of the night, I noticed many people just wandering the campgrounds in the pitch black, with no flashlights or anything. This made me even more uneasy about our situation. Finally, I noticed people had stopped wandering through the campsite. It was about 20 minutes or so after, and I see something off in the distance. It looked like a man, but I wasn't sure. The thing or man, or whatever it was, just stood there staring at me until I saw it moving. I started to sweat and my heart began to race, so I turned on all the lights in the car, woke my friend up, turned them back off after. I told him what I'd seen, so we looked and the thing was closer. We both started to panic, so we called his parents who were in the camper sleeping. We never did figure out what it was. We left early that next day. Mrs. Thomas's Pet Shop of Horrors. For reference, I'm female who was in Mrs. Thomas's preschool class when the story occurred in the early 1980s. The school was in a church just outside of the Pittsburgh area. We had a gerbil in the class as a pet and mascot named Herbie. Our duties as a class were to watch, care for it, and learn more about rodents. One day during a class break, I went to check in on Herbie and noticed that his little neck was outstretched and hind legs were shuffling in the cedar chips because he was having difficulty reaching his water basin. You know, the clear cylinder filled with water. They could just suck the water out of the silver straw attached. He was clearly trying to reach his water source. I simply then did what I still would do now, gently squeeze on the water basin until I see little water droplets coming out. To my relief, Herbie was lapping up the water at his own pace. The next thing I know, Mrs. Thomas yanks me out of the classroom by my arm, takes me to the sink where we washed our hands and cleaned our paintbrushes. This was in the hallway directly across from the classroom, slightly to the right, and she literally places the stepping stool up to the sink. Again, I was only 4, and so small that I couldn't even reach the sink on my own. She proceeds to turn on the water, plug it up, and fill the sink while demanding I step up to it. This sick child abuser was making her own spectacle out of this. She then pushes me slightly forward by the nape of my neck over a sink that is 3/4 full, accusing me of trying to drown the gerbil and yelling at me, "How would you feel if you were drowning?" I was so terrified I couldn't make a sound. Tears were streaming down my face. I will never forget turning my head to the left and seeing 3 of my classmates, 2 boys and a girl. They were peeking their heads out of the doorway, watching an absolute horror. I was never submersed in the water, but the mental damage was done. Once she finally released me, I was pulled aside into the bathroom and was then threatened that if I told my parents or anyone about this, I would be in a lot of trouble and would never see my friends at school again. The 3 students never asked me about it, and as far as I know, nothing was ever said. Fast forward to Christmas break in the 4th grade. We had since moved out of state and were at the airport flying back to Pennsylvania to visit for family Christmas. To this day, I truly will never know how or why the memory was triggered, but before we boarded that plane, I felt guilty about hiding the incident to my parents and broke down into tears. I told my mom and dad everything about that day. We arrived at my grandparents' home late in the evening, caught up on some very good cookies and milk, then hit the sack. When I awoke the next morning, my aunts were already there to get me ready and to take me shopping at the coveted Monroe Mall. After a few moments upon waking up, I asked everyone where my mom and dad were. "Oh, they had to run a special errand today and will meet us for lunch at the mall." This is probably the part I should mention that my mom's side was definitely an old school Irish-Italian family. Looking back as a parent myself, it all makes sense. The role my parents had to play of calmness and comforting when I told them about the incident, yet the look in their eyes of absolute horror and rage towards this teacher. My mother volunteered in the classroom, knew and trusted this teacher. Some years later in my early teens, I asked my mom where they went that day. She claimed they went to school to ask about the teacher and report what I had told them. They were told that Mrs. Thomas passed away from cancer. That's all I remember, as my mother has passed some time ago, and my father is in his 80s, and I see no reason to remind him of this awful memory while living out his golden years. Things are very different 40+ years later in schools with lawsuits. No more corporal disciplining and cameras now all over the classrooms and halls. Thankfully, I truly believe no teacher would ever get away with something like that now. I also believe it's truly a miracle how our brains can repress an incident so traumatic until we can actually process things and recall the details. What happened to me as a preschooler should happen to no child ever. Mrs. Thomas, I do hope you asked for forgiveness before your passing and were truly sorry for what you did. Something tells me I'm not the only child you abused, as I remember you being an older teacher at the time with lots of opportunities over the years. Perhaps it was cancer that did you in, or perhaps my family plumbing business took matters into their own hands. I've been working from home for about 2 years. 3 weeks ago, I was asked to come into the office, and yesterday was my first day back working at home. We have one of those doorbell cameras, but it broke down. Since I'm home all the time, we haven't gotten around to fix it or replace it. We haven't taken it down either. I don't have a gate or anything in my house. It's just the driveway, then the door. I have a clear view of my driveway and front door from my bedroom window. At around 1 p.m. there was a knock at the door. I looked out my window and saw a man. He had a dark brown hoodie and jeans. He didn't look like he was expecting someone to open the door. He also pressed the non-working doorbell multiple times. It seemed like he was paying more attention to the street, looking around nervously. When someone knocks at my door and I don't know them, I will not answer the door. I just stay quiet until they leave. But this time I got a weird feeling, like I had a heavy rock in my stomach and alarms going off in my head. I yelled, "Coming!" He suddenly stood straight up and looked around some more, waited a few seconds and walked away in a hurry. I looked at him until he disappeared out of my view. This was one of the moments that your instincts kick in, and deep down you know something bad may have happened and can't stop thinking about it. This morning my nosy neighbor, we all have that one neighbor, came by to tell me the week's gossip. It was my day off, so I was sweeping my driveway. Someone had broken into one house yesterday. Nothing was stolen, but the shower had been used. The kitchen was messy from someone cooking. The bed was unmade and all the TVs were left on. The horror was the family pet had been killed. Don't have full details on that. I don't live in a nice neighborhood. A lot of my neighbors have cameras and alarm systems for this reason. I couldn't stop thinking about this guy that knocked. According to some neighbors, they saw this weird guy around the block, supposedly selling some cleaning products and supplies, but he only carried a clipboard with him. I went to my neighbors that live across the street from me. I know they have cameras and I was hoping maybe they caught something. So for 3 days this guy had been knocking on my door at the same time every day. I guess his MO was to make sure no one was home and then break in. What would have happened if I stayed quietly like I normally do when someone unknown knocks at my door? He would have probably come in with me in the house. God, it creeps me out. When I was walking back to my house, my doorbell caught my attention. It was full of some gunky, sticky stuff, like someone attempted to cover the camera. Guess I should definitely replace that. There's talk of some neighbors having video evidence. Others say they actually saw the guy. It's all still going on. I'm sure I'll know more about it in the next few days. I'm feeling very anxious, thinking of going on a trip to visit my family just to get away for a bit. I don't live in the US, so the way police handle matters here is much differently. I've spent a lot of time in the woods in the dark. It is a thrilling, unique feeling. There are some strange and scary moments, and this one is one of the worst. Before I start the story, let me ask you this. Would you do the following if you had the chance? Me and my friends were night walking on a track surrounded by forest and cornfields. In the distance, we heard some voices and saw some phone lights. It was 3 people that were coming closer to us. Well, we had plenty of time to prepare, to put ourselves in the cornfields, which we did. As soon as they passed us, we made the corn move heavily, so it made a lot of noise. Another guy made some noises. The people then returned where they came from. Now for the real story. This time it was me and my best friend having a nightly adventure in another nature region. In the distance we heard a group of people having a gathering. We couldn't see them as there was also a steep hill in between. Now we contemplated about doing the old scare thing, first some scouting of the area. We went up this steep hill, and on top of it, we still couldn't see the people in the distance, only hear them. There must have been 5 different voices speaking at the same time. Now, to scout out other people, you need to be in complete darkness and silence, which we did. While we are on top of this hill, which is completely covered in bush, we hear some rustling coming from below, slowly but surely closer to us. The owner of the sounds tried his best to be sneaky and slow, but in complete silence you hear every detail. There were also little branches breaking under his feet. We could hear that he was alone. We are now sitting there between our bushes, haven't moved yet since we started noticing we were being stalked. Any second it would reach us now. We could really feel the presence. I made some hand gestures and we relocated as slow and as quiet as we could to the center of the hill. As we were progressing downwards, this thing or man still kept getting closer towards us. You know what? Fuck this. I now stood up and made myself bigger and ran fast to where the noise came from. I yelled to my buddy, "Find him!" For another 20 seconds we kick bushes and look around. Now we're not longer in hiding mode. We pause again to hear if we can find our opponent again, and we can't. After this we left the hill. We stay a bit further still in viewing distance of the hill. After several minutes, we heard and saw nothing. When I turned 14, I had a friend that was turning 13, and our parents surprised us by letting us get our ears pierced together. We had fun. We picked out an extra pair, and then we went to the food court. When we sat down, they went over the loudspeaker to say that the mall was closing in 5 minutes. We thought, okay, we just have to eat faster. Then 2 minutes later, a security guard told us that we should get going. We packed up and went towards the parking lot. My mom had left, so I was riding home with them. It turns out they had parked in the Macy's parking garage, and the Macy's locked their doors. There was another family there that was locked out as well. We both tried knocking on the door, but no one came. After 5 minutes, we decided to give up. Then this guy came up to us and said he knew a way to the parking garage. Both of our groups looked at each other and agreed to go together. He led us to this door around the corner, and we followed him down a long hallway. The hallway had white walls and wooden boards in random spots. It was kind of like an unfinished basement type aesthetic. Then before the turn, there was a doorway he decided to open, which led down to a stairwell. Someone from the other group held the door and we spread out down the stairs. I stayed a bit more towards the top because, me being a true crime fan, I felt like something was off. It felt like a story in a podcast I had recently listened to. My friend's mom opened the door, and there was just another hallway. We were officially freaked out when I noticed that the guy had ditched us. He literally disappeared. We sprinted up the stairs, and as we made it up the stairs, we could hear talking around the corner of the hallway, the corner we hadn't turned. The second we were out, we all walked towards a different exit together. We never saw the guy as we walked through the mall. It was almost like he had just disappeared into thin air. So learn from my experience. Never go down the back dark hallways. Who knows what would have happened? Would we have been lost in a maze? Was the guy planning something? Who were the other voices I heard? I'll never know. Thank you guys for watching and listening. Please be sure to leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe for future videos. Email all of your true encounters to thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. The link to my email will be in the description box below as well. Until we meet again, stay sinful.